Those opinions were solely Dr. Bornstein.
Yeah, this is a big day for medicine, it has to be said. It's going to change. Thank you very much, my friend. And thanks to you at home for joining with us this hour. I need you to bear with me here on this opening story we're going to do, because you will not have heard this anywhere else. But bear with me here and just hear me out. I think this is important. I think there is something weird going on with regard to the Republican presidential debate that is scheduled for tomorrow night in Las Vegas. CNN hosting that debate. CNN announced their criteria weeks ago for how candidates could qualify to get into that debate. And then yesterday morning at 9 a.m., they were all set to make the big announcement on air on CNN who made it into their debate, who's going to be on the main stage, who's going to be at the kids' table, and who is not invited at all. Here comes the announcement.
And with just 2 days until the next debate, we will reveal who made it to CNN's main stage and who's been bumped off. Plus, the top political minds join us live from the Las Vegas Strip. Hello, I'm Jake Tapper, live in Las Vegas.
I love me some Jake Tapper. He's a great guy. That was kind of a weird thing on CNN, though, yesterday morning. It's the start of a show, 9 o'clock. CNN said, we're going to announce who has made our debate. They did not make any such announcement on Jake Tapper's show, even though they said they were going to. We'll have that announcement coming up. They didn't make the announcement. It was nearly 4 hours later, during the re-air of Mr. Tapper's broadcast, they did finally, belatedly, get around to making that announcement, hours after they said they would. And when they did finally make the big announcement, they did not explain what the delay had been about. And when they did finally make the announcement, there was something weird about what they announced.
Republican debate right here on the Strip. Right now, your first look at the stage. And there are 9 podiums up there. During the primetime debate, Donald Trump remains front and center, flanked by his newest closest rival, Ted Cruz, and also Ben Carson. Also on the main stage, Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush, John Kasich, Chris Christie, Carly Fiorina, and Rand Paul. And in Tuesday's first round debate, Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, Lindsey Graham, and George Pataki will face off. The candidates are beginning to arrive here in Las Vegas, many planning on last-minute rallies here to mobilize their supporters before this, the final GOP debate of 2015. It's going to be an exciting night, and it all starts right here on CNN, 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. Up next, Frank Sinatra.
Wait, up next? That was it. That was the whole discussion. That was the whole explanation. It was like, okay, here's who's in the debate. Let's not talk about this. Let's don't talk about this. How about that? Because, in fact, what CNN just announced hours after they said they would announce it, with no explanation for the delay, when they finally did announce it, what they gave as the roster of candidates in that debate is actually huge news. And it's huge news about CNN. Because CNN has apparently decided to try to affect the Republican presidential primary process. They've decided to put their thumb on the scale. And here's what I mean. CNN announced weeks ago the criteria for making this debate, what you had to do to be eligible to get on the stage. Basically, in this debate, there are 3 ways candidates can make it onto the main stage. You can get a 3.5% polling average in national polls, or you can get a 4% polling average in Iowa, or a 4% polling average in New Hampshire. 3.5 nationally, 4 in either of the first 2 states. And CNN is very upfront about this, right? They're not all woolly about their debate criteria like Fox has been, honestly. CNN is very, very specific and transparent. They said they would look at polls that came out between October 29th and December 13th. They even gave a specific time of day by which a poll needed to be out on December 13th in order to be a qualifying poll. They give an exact, specific list of which news organizations and universities' polls they would use. They even spelled out how they would do the math in order to come out with the average. They spelled it out quick. Look, poll averages will not be rounded up or down to the closest whole number. No rounding. So you just get the average that you get. So that's really specific. And because they were so specific, hallelujah, with criteria that transparent, everybody's been able to follow along. We've all been able to keep track with each new poll as to how candidates are doing in trying to get into the next Republican debate. We're all looking at the same numbers, right? These are the numbers that CNN is looking at. It's all available polling. There's nothing proprietary about their process. This is the data. We've all got access to the same data. And the criteria are really generous. You don't have to qualify in Iowa and New Hampshire and nationally. You just have to qualify in one of those. So nationwide, for example, look, there are only 5 candidates who make the criteria of having a polling average over 3.5% nationwide. But there's a handful of candidates who are doing terribly in the national polls, Carly Fiorina, John Kasich, and Chris Christie, but they're still going to make the main debate stage comfortably because turns out, even though they've got numbers like this nationally, they're doing great in New Hampshire. You need a 4% polling average in New Hampshire or in Iowa in order to make it onto the debate stage, even if you are doing terribly nationwide. And so good New Hampshire numbers like these put John Kasich and Chris Christie and Carly Fiorina all very comfortably on the main stage, even though their national numbers stink. And now we get to the part that's really weird. Now we get to the part that I sort of can't believe isn't a big national news story. Because these are the polling numbers for a candidate named Senator Rand Paul. Nationwide, again, he would need to hit a polling average of 3.5% in order to make the main stage. He does not get it. He's at 2.73%. Unlike those other candidates I just mentioned, Rand Paul also has bad numbers in New Hampshire. He would need 4% in New Hampshire to qualify for the main stage. He's not at 4% in New Hampshire. He's at 3%. How about Iowa? Again, he needs just 4% as his polling average in Iowa in order to make the main stage. Rand Paul does not make a 4% polling average in Iowa. He's at 3.67%. And you might say, oh, well, that rounds up to 4%. But explicitly, CNN says they are not rounding. Poll numbers, what's the phrase? Will not be rounded up or down to the closest whole number. And so, manifestly, overtly, explicitly, with absolutely no gray area whatsoever, Rand Paul doesn't make it. Rand Paul does not make it onto the main stage for the Republican debate tomorrow. Really. He does not make it by CNN's own very clear, stated in advance, transparent public rules. But there's CNN announcing with no fanfare whatsoever that Rand Paul has made the debate. And up next, Frank Sinatra. And then throughout the day, yesterday and today, they keep talking about Rand Paul making their own debate as if somehow his polling numbers justified it, which they don't. I mean, CNN is not like a cockamamie off-the-rails news organization, but what they're doing here, this is so weird.
Senator Rand Paul will indeed be on the debate stage tomorrow night. At the very last minute, Paul qualified for the main stage after a Fox News poll showed his support up to 5% in Iowa.
That's not true. There was a Fox News poll that showed him at 5% in Iowa, but that wasn't enough to qualify him for the CNN debate under CNN's own rules. He doesn't get a polling average of 4% or more in Iowa, even with the late-breaking Iowa Fox News poll. But CNN has just, I don't mean to be weird, but they have been, I hesitate to say lying, but they've been lying about this on their own air for a couple of days now, and I really don't understand why.
Doug Stafford joins me now. He's the senior strategist for Rand Paul's campaign. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Carol. How are you?
I'm good. First of all, what's it like? You're waiting for these polls to see if you qualify for the main stage. This Fox News poll comes out Sunday at the last minute. What's that like for you and the candidate?
Well, we're just very pleased that Senator Paul is going to be on the main stage where we believe that he belongs.
It's so weird, because here's Rand Paul's campaign guy talking to a CNN anchor about how Rand Paul qualified for the CNN debate with this new poll. And the Rand Paul campaign guy knows that Rand Paul did not qualify for the CNN debates. But he's just going to kind of go with it. We believe he ought to be on that stage. Yes, ma'am. But this is how CNN has been mishandling this issue on the air.
9 candidates will compete in the primetime debate, with Chris Christie and Rand Paul being awarded spots in the main stage based on late polling numbers.
No candidate has more different ideas when it comes to national security than Rand Paul, who there was some thought that he might not make the main stage. He did make the main stage. He will be there Tuesday night. That's a big deal from him.
What would have happened had he not made it, had that Fox News poll not come out?
No. Even with that Fox News poll coming out, he didn't make it. And it is a big deal for him that he's not getting relegated to the undercard debate, that he's being allowed onto the main stage. But it has nothing to do with his own polling performance. His polling performance by CNN's own rules means that he shouldn't be there. He literally did not make the cut. CNN, nevertheless, is pretending on air that he did make the cut, and they're breaking their own rules, apparently, in order to let him into this debate. And it turns out they will admit that if you press them on the matter, no matter what their anchors are saying on the air. CNN's full statement explaining why they are letting Rand Paul break their rules and be in the debate that he has not qualified for is this, quote, "In the light of new polling released this morning and in the spirit of being as inclusive as possible, CNN has decided to include Senator Rand Paul in the primetime debate." Again, the new polling released yesterday morning does not qualify Rand Paul for the debate. But CNN has decided to let him in because they felt a spirit of inclusiveness. The spirit of inclusiveness apparently did not extend its fairy wand over George Pataki or Rick Santorum or Lindsey Graham or Mike Huckabee. They don't get vaulted to the main table, even though they haven't qualified for it. The spirit of inclusiveness at CNN only cheats for Rand Paul. But why? Why? Why are they doing this? Why are they breaking the rules to let Rand Paul do something he hasn't qualified for? You have to remember that the last time CNN had a Republican debate, you might remember they also bent their rules in order to let Carly Fiorina onto the main stage. In that case, though, CNN at least had the good sense to announce that they were changing their rules well in advance of actually declaring who was in the debate. And they didn't just change the rules specifically because the spirit of something told them to for Carly Fiorina. They at least changed the overall criteria for how to get into that debate in a way that had the effect, yes, of letting her in, but theoretically it could have applied to other candidates as well. In this case, it's just, we think Rand Paul gets to cheat this time. Which must be awesome for Rand Paul. But it is truly inexplicable for CNN. And yeah, it feels weird enough that the most likely outcome of the Republican primary process this year is that the Republican Party is going to pick Donald Trump to be their presidential nominee. But don't let that bizarre outcome, the likelihood of that bizarre outcome at this point, overshadow how freaking bizarre their process has been and continues to be this whole year. You might remember the day after the last CNN debate, the RNC said they weren't going to have any more kids' tables at any more debates. No more undercard debates, they announced in September. Well, at all the debates since then, they've had kids' tables, they've had undercards. Who's in control of this process? And then tomorrow night, the kids' table really should include Rand Paul for the first time ever, but CNN inexplicably decided to give a boost to his campaign and let him break the rules and be on the main stage, so he'll be on the main stage. Of the people left at the kids' table, two of them are, I think it's fair to say, sort of on the watch list as candidates most likely to drop out of the race next. George Pataki is one of those candidates. We've been waiting for the other shoe to drop in George Pataki's candidacy ever since we learned 2 weeks ago that he did not qualify to even be on the ballot in the Florida Republican primary this year. We actually sent the George Pataki campaign an inquiry asking for their reaction to not getting on the ballot in Florida. And their answer was really funny. Governor Pataki's spokesman just wrote us back this one line. "Last I checked, Florida is winner take all." We asked for clarification for what he meant by that. Why does that make it okay that you're not on the ballot? But he wouldn't write us back anymore after he wrote us that. Therefore, I think it just means that because they thought George Pataki had no chance of winning in Florida, they're not going to bother even trying to get his name on the ballot in that state. And frankly, that's a kind of logic that could be applied to a lot of states if you're George Pataki. But so far, he has not dropped out of the race. Another kids' table dropout watch lister right now is Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee won the Iowa caucuses in 2008, which is part of why people think winning the Iowa caucus isn't that important anymore. Mike Huckabee won Iowa in 2008. He cannot get arrested in Iowa this year. He has terrible numbers in Iowa and terrible numbers everywhere. Now today, Mike Huckabee lost one of his top staffers, and it was a surprise. His press secretary and top spokesperson quit today with really no warning and no explanation. She worked for him in 2008 when he won Iowa. She also worked for Rick Santorum in 2012 when he won Iowa. She has been working with Governor Huckabee again this year. Until today. And now she's gone with no explanation. This was the full statement put out by the Mike Huckabee campaign to announce she was gone. Quote, "Alice Stewart is no longer with the Huckabee for President campaign." Period. So no thanks, no praise, no spending more time with her family, nothing. Mike Huckabee is below 3% nationwide. He's below 2% in Iowa. He's below 1% in New Hampshire. And now some of his top staff is quitting without explanation. So when it comes to Mike Huckabee, tick-tock. Up at the top of the ticket, this was a weekend of good news for Ted Cruz, particularly in Iowa. But the biggest of the big stories continues to be Mr. Trump. Correlation is not causation, and it may all be one big coincidence. But since Mr. Trump proposed to ban all Muslims from entering the United States, the news has been getting better and better and better for him. Since his Muslim ban proposal, there have been 3 major national polls released: the Monmouth poll, the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, and the CBS New York Times poll. All 3 of those polls released since Mr. Trump proposed banning Muslims from the country. All 3 of those polls show Mr. Trump's support going up. There have also been 3 major polls in Iowa in that time: the Des Moines Register poll, the Fox News poll, and the Quinnipiac poll. Even though Ted Cruz shows strength in those polls, the fact remains that 2 of the 3 of those show Donald Trump's support going up since he proposed banning Muslims from the country. The third one is the first of its kind this year, that Fox News Iowa poll. So there's no way to know if Mr. Trump's support was going up or down in that one. There's also been 1 major poll conducted in New Hampshire since Mr. Trump proposed his Muslim ban, and that poll as well found Mr. Trump's numbers going up, found his support growing. But the biggest news, because it's the biggest number, a number that made people's jaws drop all over the country today, was this result in the current national poll just released this afternoon by Monmouth. Look at that. Mr. Trump has 41%. He has a 27-point lead over his nearest rival. This is an astonishing lead. This basically shows Donald Trump neck and neck with a mythical candidate who's made up of all of the other candidates combined. Whatever you think about the rise of Donald Trump, this particular poll today showing him at 41% support, this particular poll today is kind of freaking people out. Joining us now is the man who did this particular poll today that's freaking everybody out, Patrick Murray, director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute. Mr. Murray, it's great to have you here.
It's good to be here, Rachel.
A 27-point lead and 41% support overall seems like an outlier. It seems ginormous, even for a candidate who seems to have a clear lead.
Right. And there have been a number of polls right now that have shown him in the 30s. And This is the first that have significantly put him over 40%. And that follows our Iowa poll last week, where we actually had him trailing Ted Cruz. So this is a tale of 2 different types of polling right now. You look at those 3 polls that you show, and they each ask a different question. We ask, who would you support for the presidential Republican nomination of anybody who identifies as a Republican or a Republican-leaning voter? Other polls, I think the NBC Wall Street Journal poll asks, are you going to vote in the primary in your state? And if so, who are you going to vote for? There's another poll that asks, who would you like to see win the Republican nomination, right? So they're all very different. They ask them in different places in the questionnaire, either before or after issues, which could help Donald Trump in terms of the voters who are thinking in terms of these poll respondents. But the number here is that he was at 28% in our poll in October. And now he's going up to 41% using the exact same methodology.
So the apples-to-apples comparison shows him going from 28 to 41 from October to now?
Right. And every single poll that's been coming out of the past few weeks has shown him going up. And if you look at his overall trend line, going back 5 weeks when he started to drop a little bit, and that stopped 5 weeks ago, and he's been consistently going up. Every time he says something bizarre, outside the mainstream, something that makes Republican leaders cringe and squirm, his supporters say, that's why we like Donald Trump, because he's going right after the political establishment. He's saying the kinds of things that we want to say because we want to send politicians a message that the politics as usual just doesn't cut it anymore. And we want somebody out there who's going to do it. The real question here is that there's no such thing as a national primary. So all this national primary polling just gives us a general sense of the mood of the country, the mood of Republican voters. But it does not tell us what's going to happen in Iowa and New Hampshire.
And that's the way we vote. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. When people were looking at the earlier polling in this race, one thing that a lot of people said while looking at the data was, it appears that there is a ceiling for Donald Trump. Wow, surprisingly robust numbers for Donald Trump. Who would have thunk it for this non-politician, this amateur in the race? But he's got a ceiling. Don't get too excited. What were people looking at when they were saying that? And are we sure they were wrong? It feels like they were.
I think there is a ceiling. It's just the ceiling is a little higher than probably we thought it was going to be. When we talk to when we talk to Republican voters who don't support Trump, the vast majority of them say Trump is not presidential timber. So they're not going to vote for him. So there is this kind of ceiling. And I think the ceiling is even higher in a place like Iowa or New Hampshire, where we're talking about real voters. What Trump is bringing in is people who don't participate in the partisan process.
Oh, so it's not that he's persuading people who used to say, I'd never vote for him in any circumstance. No. Those people still exist, but more people are coming into the process saying, I want to vote because I want to vote for Trump.
And the question is, if you've never gone out and spent 2 hours at a caucus on a cold February night in Iowa, is this the first time that you're going to do it? Is Donald Trump really sparking you without having those kind of organizational supports? Because remember, Iowa is all about one precinct leader bringing 20 people with them to the polls and getting them to support one particular candidate. Donald Trump needs all these different voters to come out of their own accord, just out of the blue, never having shown up at this kind of event before, and say, I'm going to spend 2 hours because I really believe in Donald Trump. It's a lot different than what happened 8 years ago with Barack Obama, when he brought out voters, an incredible number of voters in Iowa, through organization and through a very hopeful message, like we're going to change politics for the better. This is like, we're just going to destroy Washington. And I'm not sure people come out to vote for that. But, you know, Donald Trump has basically blown up every rule that we have in politics so far, so he might blow up this one
The new rule is no extrapolating from the past into this year.
Exactly.
Because that doesn't work anymore. Patrick Murray, director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute, which turned out this astonishing 41% number for Donald Trump today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Much more to come on this very busy news night. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Behold, Donald Trump's record of health. This is a letter Donald Trump released today from his doctor, as all presidential candidates are expected to do at one point or another. This letter naturally attests to Mr. Trump's good health, but this being Donald Trump, all similarities to any other presidential candidate end there. The letter, weirdly, is dated 10 days ago, and it begins like this. To whom my concern? I have been the personal physician of Mr. Donald J. Trump since 1980. His previous physician was my father, Dr. Jacob Bornstein. Now, what's weird about that is that Donald Trump tweeted today that this letter was from Jacob Bornstein, in which case he must have filed it away before he passed. Over the past 39 years, I'm pleased to report that Mr. Trump has had no significant medical problems. Actually, that's in the text. Actually, his blood pressure, 110/65, and his lab test results were astonishingly excellent. If elected, Mr. Trump, I can state unequivocally, will be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. Healthier than Lincoln, healthier than Andrew Jackson, healthier than James K. Polk, healthier than notoriously healthy President Taft. Healthiest president ever, unequivocally. Which I can state unequivocally is the weirdest presidential health statement we've ever had for any candidate ever. But that's what it's like this year, with this particularly astonishingly excellent frontrunner. Joining us now from Las Vegas, the site of tomorrow night's Republican debate, is Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post and now an MSNBC political analyst. Robert, it's nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
I know that you've been talking to several of the campaigns today about how they're approaching tomorrow's debate. What are they saying? Should we expect something in line with the previous debate's trajectory, or should we expect something new?
I think we should expect a new dynamic tomorrow, connecting with several of the campaigns today, both mainstream Republicans and conservatives. Trump is the target. He continues to lead national polls. And if you're a Jeb Bush, a Marco Rubio, a Chris Christie trying to get some traction in this race, you have to perhaps go at Trump harder than you have before.
In terms of Mr. Trump's popularity, one of the things I was just discussing with the Monmouth University pollster who was here moments ago is that even if you are suspicious about any individual poll right now, there does seem to be a consistent trend since he made his proposal that Muslims should be banned from the United States. Basically, every poll since then has shown him going up, getting more support. Do we expect that to be a point of contention, or is that something where the other candidates are not going to want to be competing with him?
People who are really struggling right now in this race, I've spoken to allies of Senator Paul, allies of Governor Kasich of Ohio. They may look at Trump and really take him on the Muslim front. But because it's so popular with Republican-based voters, there's a real hesitation privately among many of the campaigns to go at Trump and to call him out. Because you could have a moment, they tell me, but at the same time, you don't want to have his wrath.
Robert, you wrote a story a few days ago about party leaders, Republican Party leaders, preparing for a potentially contested convention, a convention in which there might not be a clear nominee heading into it. Now, as far as I can tell, candidate Ben Carson appears to have reacted to your reporting, reacted to that story by basically threatening to leave the Republican Party. He interpreted that story as the Republican Party scheming to deny the nomination to Mr. Trump. Did Mr. Carson, Dr. Carson, misunderstand that reporting, or is that in fact what's happening?
I think there's been some misunderstanding of the reporting, because it wasn't reporting about an anti-Trump effort or an anti-Carson effort. It was about the Republican establishment and two of the biggest leaders in the party, Chairman Priebus of the RNC and Senator McConnell, thinking about the reality, the possibility of a brokered convention. But I understand the fear of a lot of grassroots conservatives, especially their campaigns, because they do fear if this campaign went to a second ballot in Cleveland and those delegates became unbound, they do fear that the establishment, the Republican elites, would maneuver to take the nomination.
Robert, I have to ask, I mean, when I look at the numbers, if I look at the numbers agnostically, and I pretend that I don't know what candidates' names attend to each number, it looks to me like there's a really clear frontrunner. And there's maybe a little competition in Iowa, but the last two winners in Iowa were Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee, so who cares? And it looks like Mr. Trump is really far ahead everywhere. And it seems to me like this is a weird time to be expecting a convention where there isn't somebody who's clearly on top. What is it about Mr. Trump's lead that the RNC is suspicious about and thinks might not last until the convention?
There's a question about Trump's organization. But you and I have spoken before how Trump has the Americans for Prosperity alumni on his campaign. Corey Lewandowski's running it. And they have a strong team in Iowa. They're in the lead in New Hampshire, have been in the lead for months. They have a ground game there, the campaign managers from New Hampshire. And they have a national grassroots network that's pretty powerful. Cruz is well organized as well. But what this is actually shaping into, not only in the polls but on the ground, is potentially a Cruz-Trump showdown, not the usual establishment versus conservative fight.
Robert Costa, Washington Post national political reporter, always truly insightful. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it.
Remains to be seen what exactly will come out of tomorrow night's debate on the Donald Trump Muslim ban issue, his call to ban Muslim immigration and even tourist visitation in this country. But there was a fascinating election result on that issue this weekend in another country, in France. Voters in France this weekend resoundingly rejected the political party that's called the Front National, the National Front. That's the party led by Marine Le Pen, which is built on essentially anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, pseudo-fascistic French nativism. And a week ago, her party finished first in an initial round of regional elections in that country. The final vote, the next round of voting, was this weekend. Ahead of this weekend's vote, a rival party actually encouraged its voters in some regions to unite behind a mainstream conservative rival to the National Front so as not to split the vote. They did that just to make sure the National Front wouldn't win. That strategy appears to have worked. Just a month after the Paris terror attacks, more than 70% of voters rejected the anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant National Front, which appeared to be surging after the attacks. The party did not win a single region. Okay, this is an amazing story. Portland, Maine, fittingly, has a big and busy port. People there are used to seeing ships outside their windows, right? Cruise ships, cargo ships, tugboats, fishing boats, tankers, you name it. But last week, even the city's longtime residents who have seen a lot of ships in and out of their port, they were caught off guard when this truly strange-looking vessel slipped into Portland Harbor unannounced. What is that? Ship kind of looks like kind of a pyramid with its top cut off, maybe. The bow coming at you is almost impossible to see in a way that you can understand. It's got a razor-sharp angle on that bow. This is a U.S. Navy destroyer called the Zumwalt, first in its class. It weighs more than 15,000 tons. But because of the way that it's built, because of its sharp angles and its flat planes, on radar, this thing looks like basically a little fishing boat. It does not look like a 600-foot-long warship. It's almost invisible on radar. In addition to the Zumwalt's tiny profile on radar, it can deliberately take on water and sit itself very low in the water. Conversely, it can also be used in really shallow water where you wouldn't think a 600-foot ship could sail. It's the largest ever destroyer built for the U.S. Navy. It's also the most powerful. The Zumwalt can produce enough energy on board to power about 47,000 American homes. The Navy hopes to one day outfit this thing with one of its most futuristic weapons, a rail gun. Not a nail gun, a rail gun, which fires projectiles at 7 times the speed of sound, more than 5,000 miles per hour. If the Zumwalt didn't sound straight out of science fiction enough for you already, I should tell you that the name of its original captain is James Kirk. Captain James Kirk, seriously. But on the Zumwalt in this case. So early Saturday morning, something really interesting happened with the Zumwalt. The U.S. Coast Guard sent out a request looking for assistance from any nearby vessels that were in the waters off of Portland. Turns out the captain of a 45-foot-long fishing boat called the Danny Boy was having chest pains. He called in a "I need help" to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard flew a rescue chopper out to get him out of their base on Cape Cod. But when they got there, they couldn't figure out a safe way to hoist him onto the helicopter from his fishing boat. It wasn't going to work for some reason. And so the Coast Guard put out a call for any ships in the vicinity who might be able to help. And wouldn't you know it, there was this guy. The Zumwalt was out there going through its first deep water testing, and they said, sure, we can help. We have some capability that might come in handy here. The Zumwalt launched a small boat like the kind used by Navy SEALs and other special forces. They sent that small boat out to the Danny Boy. The crew on the small boat boarded the Danny Boy. They collected the sick fishermen. They put him on their little boat. They brought that little boat back to the Zumwalt. And then, as you can see in this video here, he was later hoisted from the deck of the destroyer onto the Coast Guard helicopter for rescue. So the fishing boat, the Danny Boy, didn't offer a lot of space for that Coast Guard chopper to get the fishermen out. But a 600-foot-long Navy destroyer that weighs 15,000 tons and cost $4 billion, yeah, it turns out that offers a pretty nice platform, a pretty commodious platform for collecting the fishermen. He was taken to a nearby hospital. He's in stable condition. So, yeah, technically this is a your taxpayer dollars at work story, but not exactly the way anyone expected. Handy to have that little honey around when you need a hand, right? That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow.
The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks, my friend.
You bet.
And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Got a big show for you tonight. Before the Bridgegate scandal broke open in New Jersey, one of Governor Chris Christie's top political staffers left New Jersey. He quit Team Chris Christie to instead go take a job in the crucial early primary state of New Hampshire. This was a brilliant move by Chris Christie, right, in terms of positioning himself for his presidential run. He installed one of his own top guys as executive director of the state Republican Party in New Hampshire. If you're going to run for president, particularly you're going to run for president with a campaign focused on New Hampshire, that's genius. Inside guy, right? Great move. And then the Bridgegate scandal happened. And it turned out that staffer who Chris Christie so brilliantly sent to go be his guy in New Hampshire, turns out that guy was right in the middle of all the controversy over Bridgegate. He ultimately got subpoenaed and was forced to testify in the investigation into Bridgegate. He got dragged right through the middle of it. And so just like that, presto, Chris Christie's brilliant political move concerning the New Hampshire State Republican Party became one of the most interesting mini scandals involving the New Hampshire Republican Party. Are New Hampshire Republicans unnerved by their executive director of their state party having to testify in the Bridgegate scandal? Interesting. Well, now that Chris Christie is at 3% nationally, everything about him and his political scandals is pretty much an irrelevance in the presidential race. But it turns out the Republican Party of New Hampshire has a more interesting mini controversy roiling its ranks as we get closer and closer to the New Hampshire primary. This is Jennifer Horn. She's the state chair of the Republican Party. And this week, when Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump put out his proposal that all Muslims should be banned from entering the United States, the New Hampshire State Republican chair, Jennifer Horn, put out this statement in response. It says, quote, "While my position is certainly political, I am an American first. There should never be a day in the United States of America when people are excluded based solely on their race or religion. It is un-Republican, it is unconstitutional, and it is un-American." From a mainstream point of view, right, that statement is kind of what you'd expect, right? It's that somewhere between righteous and yeah, duh. Because there has been so much mainstream revulsion at this proposal by Donald Trump to ban all Muslims from entering this country, that kind of statement is sort of what you're expecting from leaders at all levels who might feel compelled to respond. In Republicanville, though, what Jennifer Horn just did with that statement, she stepped in it. And boy, is she going to get in trouble for doing something like that. State legislators who support the Republican presidential frontrunner, who support Donald Trump, have now started an effort to oust Jennifer Horn as the chair of the Republican Party in the state of New Hampshire because of that statement she put out objecting to Donald Trump's position that Muslims should be banned from this country. It is true that here and there have been individual Republicans who have expressed some dismay or have expressed some criticism about Donald Trump proposing to ban all Muslims from the United States. But this idea that Republicans as a group have risen up in mutual condemnation of Donald Trump for doing this, that is absolute bullpucky. And in fact, criticizing Donald Trump may cost the chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party her job. Last night, we had these first polling results from Bloomberg, in which they asked Republican voters whether they agreed or disagreed with Donald Trump's proposal to ban all Muslims from this country. Nearly 2/3 of Republican voters told Bloomberg in that poll that they agree with Donald Trump on that proposal. We now, tonight, have a more scientifically sound look at that question from the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. There's nothing wrong with the Bloomberg poll. It was just a snap poll taken only over the course of one day. It's considered to be sort of better form in polling to poll people over a longer period of time. NBC Wall Street Journal has now done that. And if you are, as a person, horrified by Donald Trump's proposal to ban Muslims from this country, you will be heartened to see that Americans, by and large, a majority of Americans, don't agree with Mr. Trump's proposal. But when it comes to Republicans are not so sure they kind of like it. The new NBC Wall Street Journal poll that's dated just out tonight says the proportion of Republican voters who are against Donald Trump's proposal to ban all Muslims from this country, Republicans against, that's 36%. The proportion of Republicans who say they agree with Donald Trump, they like that proposal from him, is 42%. More Republicans like it than don't. 22% have no opinion. So there is widespread mainstream upset, I think it's fair to say in many cases even disgust, for what Donald Trump has proposed, but Republicans do not feel that way. These remarks, this proposal has not hurt Donald Trump. And you can see that in the direct polling on that proposal. You can also see it in his overall numbers, which right now are going through the roof. The New York Times CBS poll just came out, polled Republican voters nationwide, both before and after Donald Trump made his proposal to ban all Muslims in the country. So this polling reflects both time before he made the proposal and time since. And overall, bottom line, his numbers are astonishing. He's at 35% support nationwide. That gives him a 19-point lead over his nearest competitor. He's almost lapping the rest of that giant field. There's this, I think, unintentionally hilarious reporting tonight from the Washington Post, which says that Republican Party Chairman Reince Priebus on Monday night this week convened a large group of Republican Party leaders to talk about the prospect that the Republican Party might have to decide on their nominee at their nominating convention this year. Attendees were reportedly sent home with homework that they should look into the circumstances surrounding the 1976 Republican presidential nominating convention, because that was the last time the Republican Party went to their nominating convention without having a clear nominee. The reason I say this reporting is unintentionally hilarious is because, what do you mean no clear nominee? I mean, look at the national polling. If there's one thing the national polling and this early state polling shows right now is there's a clear nominee. Republicans at the upper echelons of the Republican Party may purport to have mixed feelings about Donald Trump, but Republican voters really don't. They have less mixed feelings about him than they ever had. And despite all of this facile beltway noise about how disgusted Republicans supposedly are with Donald Trump's proposals and what those proposals might say about the Republican Party and how much they want to distance themselves as a party from him and how much damage he's doing, you know what? It has now been 3 days since Donald Trump made his written proposal that all Muslims should be banned from the United States. So far, no one in Republican leadership and nobody running against him for the Republican presidential nomination has said that as a result of what he has done, They will not support him if he ends up being the nominee of their party. Nobody has said that. And right now, he is on track to be the nominee of their party. And although it completely bewilders the Beltway press to realize that his increasing radicalism is putting more wind in his sails and not less, that is the situation. That is the particular gale that blew Donald Trump into Portsmouth, New Hampshire tonight for an event at which he asked for and ultimately received the endorsement of the New England Police Benevolent Association. This was just supposed to be a meeting of Donald Trump and that police group. This was not supposed to be a public event. But there is so much energy around his candidacy right now that the public, those who love Donald Trump and those who really don't, decided that if he was going to be there, they were going to turn out anyway.
We have a problem. There are beliefs coming into this country that do not coincide with our constitutional rights, our amendments, our Bill of Rights. And if their beliefs are complete opposite of what we believe in and how we function in this country, then it does not belong in this country.
How do you think that would work at the border? You know, if people that
I want the wall up. I want the wall up on the southern border. I want the walls up on the northern border. This country, we have to protect we the people. And I will support Mr. Trump when he becomes president. It's we the people that will back him up and get this country back on its 2 feet and be a strong country, a strong nation, a nation of people that are wonderful. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Music in the background.
Yeah, I'm like.
What are your thoughts on the Republican Party in general right now?
I was a registered independent. I switched right over to the Republican Party.
You're not a total Trump diehard necessarily.
No, but I'm supporting him, and I'm supporting what I believe he meant when he said, ban Muslim immigration. I don't believe he's a racist. I think he was talking about, we need to step back and re-examine the vetting process and get it right. We're getting it wrong. People are being killed in America, and it's going to get worse before it gets better unless we stop what we're doing wrong and start doing it right.
So you think it's Trump just being smart in this situation?
Sure, I do. I don't think he meant all, he wasn't tagging one religion and saying banning an entire religion. I don't think he meant that.
One Donald Trump supporter in New Hampshire speaking with NBC's Katie Tur tonight, saying that he does not believe that Donald Trump meant to ban everyone from an entire religion from this country. I have to say, for the record, that is in fact what Donald Trump is proposing. He is proposing banning all Muslim entry into this country. Quoting from him directly, it was a written statement. He is, and I'm quoting him, calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. His supporters may not believe that's what he meant, but that's what he's proposing. This event tonight in Portsmouth was, again, not supposed to be a public event. But Donald Trump supporters turned out in large numbers, as did people who are not Donald Trump supporters. Again, this is just tonight in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Watch.
What brings you out here today?
I'm here just to in solidarity with others who are very concerned about Donald Trump's very racist and bigoted remarks about Muslims and about trying to deal with the problems of terrorism by banning everybody who has a certain religious belief. I think that's un-American, it's unconstitutional, and it's stirring up hatred and anger, and it's all about just trying to attract attention, but to the detriment of all of us, really, and our safety.
Why is it important to get out here and be on the street with a sign and be visible rather than...
I guess I just feel that I need to be with people who stand for caring and love and the values that I believe in. And I don't want to be alone sitting in front of the TV watching this. I want to be part of a movement that's standing up and saying we need to do something to speak the truth about what America is really about. It's not about hatred. That's not an American value.
What brings you out here today?
I'm tired of listening to Donald Trump spout off hatred, anger, fear-mongering among people, ruining America. Just can't stand listening to it anymore. My Muslim friends, my African American friends, my Hispanic friends, It's exhausting. It's not okay. It wasn't that long ago that the Irish people were the pariahs. Who's next? My family's been in this town since the 1600s. If anyone should go, it should be him, not us. He needs to leave. If anything, he's not welcome in my town.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire tonight, turning out for and against Donald Trump as he collected an important endorsement from the New England Police Benevolent Association. It wasn't at all clear that he was going to get that endorsement when he went, but he got it. In New Hampshire right now, polls say that not only is Donald Trump set to win that state in the primary, he's set to win that state by a lot. Same goes, more or less, for Mr. Trump in Iowa. Same goes, definitely, for Mr. Trump in South Carolina. Same goes, definitely, for Mr. Trump nationally. However impossible the Beltway press would portray this to be, the Republican Party and its voters do unequivocally seem poised to choose as their presidential nominee this man who really is proposing to ban all Muslims from entering the United States and everything else about him. They said it couldn't be done, but it's time to stop pretending that this is an impossibility. It's time to start recognizing that this really is happening. TikTok.
We stand here united today to introduce our candidate for the next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
I want to thank everybody. I'll tell you what, Jared, this is something that means something to me a lot. That's why I made this special trip tonight. It was, I said, this is only a 5-minute speech, but it's a lifetime. You know, I'd call it it's called the Lifetime Improvement Award. I'm improving with this award.